So in this episode of Perspective, I want to talk about a particular group of men, Incels, and that's an acronym for involuntarily celibate males.
I want to ask you just quickly, the film director Olivia Wilde has a new movie out, which she says is based on you, this insane man, this pseudo-intellectual hero to the incel community. Incel being these weirdo loner men who are despicable in many ways. Is that you? Are you the intellectual hero to these people?
Sure. Why not? People have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. What a terrible thing to do that is. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice.
It's making you emotional. Talk about that.
Well, God, it's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults, these incels. What does it mean? It's like, well, these men, they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women who are very picky, and good for them. Women, be picky. That's your gift, man. Demand high standards from your men. Fair enough. But all these men who are alienated, it's like they're lonesome and they don't know what to do, and everyone piles abuse on them.
This isn't going to be an incel bashing video. I simply want to share my perspective on why and how they became who and what they claim or what they're perceived to be. I also want to talk about solutions, because at the end of the day, if they legitimately would prefer to be different or in a different space and stage in life, perhaps I can share some ideas, some of which I'm sure they've heard before, that might aid in getting them out of the unfortunate stasis that they're in. I'd like for anybody watching the video to give your perspective in the comments. If you like or dislike the video, hit that like or dislike button. And as always, do subscribe. And without anything further, let's get into it. Now, let me preface everything I'm about to say with this. I don't have all the answers. I am ignorant as it pertains to what these men endure in their day-to-day lives. It's not lost upon me that the last thing they're most likely interested in is a Tyrone, the black version of a Chad, talking to them about their plight in life. But myself and a friend did a live video a couple of weeks ago, and there were some characters that showed up in the comments, and their feelings about us and what we had to say were on full display. And I'm wondering if they or those like them understand that we probably have more in common than they actually realize. Me and my brother did have a few laughs at the expense of these men while also trying to diagnose their circumstances. Those men probably found nothing humorous about what we found humorous, and that's fair. Men being rejected or struggling to socialize or to find social acceptance from women isn't a joke, yet quite often people, myself included, find ourselves having a good old chuckle about them and their awkward moments or situations that they obviously struggle with. Why is that? Why do people find it funny? Well, some people are just insensitive assholes. I definitely fall into that category myself from time to time. Some of us also find it funny because we've been in those shoes, and now that we're no longer there, we can laugh about it. And when I say we, I definitely say that with a degree of nuance. Okay, but situations aren't exactly identical, right? I can't say that I've been in situations and circumstances that were identical to theirs. All the variables that have to be considered don't have the highest probability of being equal. Here's an example of something I've never experienced.
Oh, wow. Hey, Tony. Aldrich Killian. I'm a big fan of your work.
My work?
Who is it? He needs me. Well, of course, but Miss Hanson, my organization...
As an adult, I have never been in this moment. I've never been this guy or felt how this guy might have felt.
Now that is an appropriate question.
He's not necessarily approaching a woman, but he's trying to interact with a group. His goal is FaceTime with a man that can make some things happen for him, and an attractive woman is in the vicinity. And having a cool guy blow you off in front of a good-looking woman can't feel good. He's awkward as hell, barely capable of keeping his words together. His appearance isn't necessarily attractive, and he's basically being pacified just enough to where they can get this guy out of their face so they can move on with their lives, and he won't even be an afterthought. That shit sucks. His intentions were pure, but the people he wanted attention from and to engage with didn't care. Had he showed up like this,
Pepper.
Killian?
You look great. You look really great.
God, you look great. I can't. What on earth have you been doing?
Nothing fancy.
that would have probably resulted in a different outcome. But we'll get to that later. The only time in my life where I could actually identify with something like this was probably as a teenager. Look at this guy. When it came to girls, there was nothing, because at this age I'm a boy, so that's why I refer to them as girls. But they really wasn't checking for the kid. I shot my shot relentlessly and was told,
Go home, Roger. Go home, Roger. Go home, Roger.
That's what it was. This was typical for those younger years. I don't remember feeling too bent out of shape about it. There was this one time though when my nose wasn't clean and I was shooting my shot. I was probably in the 6th grade though, and she literally blasted me right there on the spot. I had the nerve to be trying to get my Mac on and my nose wasn't even clean. Look, man, it was the winter time and there was obviously some nasal crumbs near and around the rim of them big ass nostrils. So what? I didn't check the mirror before I made my approach. But I distinctly remember that moment and it sucked. I was embarrassed. It would have been nice if she would have let me down easy and gave me a little advice, but we were kids and she didn't know any better. She was probably grossed out that this booger-nosed little boy had the audacity in the first place. Moments like that weren't one-offs. And getting shot down was par for the course. I think the significant difference between myself and these men is this. My family structure, the women included, were very loving and honest. See, I should have known better than to walk up to a girl with my nose like that, because I should have checked on myself. I was raised better than that. But I was excited and probably a little bit anxious or nervous, and I just sped through that stop sign because I had a destination in mind. But that family dynamic that I spoke of, I was blessed with that. Those women made me feel valued no matter what I encountered in the world, yet the men made me understand that I had to make something of myself to be valued by the world. So with regard to these men that are referred to as, or whom refer to themselves as incels, I don't know their background. Their bounce back ability or the ability to self-correct and redirect in these moments aren't taught, and subsequently they might be left in this rut that they have no clue how to get out of. Yet we keep telling them that this is what they need to become. This guy is now another version of the guy he was trying to rub shoulders with earlier in life. By that I mean, he's another version of Tony Stark. He's now one of the guys that belongs in the room. And how did he go from this to this? Obviously, this scene is from Iron Man 3. Shout out to Marvel for not copyright striking us YouTubers for using their footage. But this is a fictitious representation of real life shit. I don't know exactly how a person goes from one extreme to the next in a healthy manner on their own. And I'd probably be safe in assuming that they don't do it on their own. But who's willing to help those that actually want help? Because if you don't want help, then you can simply ignore everything that follows this moment in this video. If you do want some help, stay tuned. And of course, they're the same old recommendations, right? build your self-confidence, get some social skills, work on your physical appearance, blah, 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 right? But what about the underlying issues? The things that got these men to this place and space outside of their physical appearances. How do we get to the root of this stuff and get them situated from the inside out? So this guy, Dr. K, he has a YouTube channel and a website, and it's dedicated to mental health, and it encompasses one-on-one coaching and group coaching. I came across Dr. K as I was searching for more understanding about incels and ways to effectively communicate ideas without sounding like a Tyrone, without sounding like somebody that's simply attempting to shovel the same shit they've heard all their lives. Dr. K breaks everything down. He goes into the neuroscience and psychology at the root of an individual's frame of mind. By breaking these concepts down to their grassroots foundations, it's much easier to see where one can begin to heal and build from there. Here's an example of what I mean.
The first thing that we're going to talk about is actually emotional impact and how emotional impact affects our view of the world, okay? This is also going to become a little bit important when we talk about meditation later. The second thing that we're going to do is try to understand what is the relationship between working on yourself and dating success. And those are the two things that we're going to be focused on. So the first is our mind forms conclusions. So if we can look at this person, and I really appreciate this post for many reasons. So they're like, they've done everything right. They're like an engineer. They have a successful career. They're losing weight. They kind of don't see themselves as confident. And then they get dumped. And they even kind of acknowledge that this is not my usual mood. I had a bad week. Sorry if it sounds arrogant, envious, entitled, incelish. Hope it's okay to vent here. It's totally fine to vent here, especially in this kind of way, because this person is being a little bit reflective, right? It's not just about venting. They're sort of pointing out like what they've done. You can sort of see it in terms of the upvotes, right? It's 93% upvote rate. So I think people are totally fine with this kind of thing, because it's not just doomer kind of mentality. It's like this person's actually making effort at understanding their beliefs and sort of saying like, I'm doing everything right and I'm still getting screwed. So the first thing to understand is when you feel emotionally upset, what do y'all think that does to the conclusions that your mind forms? Right? Like, what does it do to them? So when we feel upset, it has a couple of interesting effects on our mind's ability to learn. So when we form a conclusion, we're essentially learning. So there's something really interesting, which is if you look at the hippocampus, which is the part of our brain that learns, it's very, very tightly connected to the limbic system and especially the amygdala, which is the part of our brain that experiences emotion, especially negative emotion. So learning is very, very emotional in nature. We'd like to think that we're rational human beings, and the biggest influence on our learning are actually our cerebral cortices. The cortices are like the outside of our brain, which are sort of like where a lot of our human ability to think comes from. All animals have, actually I don't know about all, but mammals certainly, all of them have amygdalas, all of them have limbic systems, and all of them have hippocampi. But the cerebral cortices is really what sets us apart. So we'd like to think that a lot of our learning comes from rational thought. But the truth of the matter is that the most powerful moments in our life in terms of when we learn lessons are emotional in nature. The challenge is that the lessons that we learn may not entirely be correct. So I want you all to think about, like moments in your life where you were like, swore something to yourself, like never again, right? Like if there are moments in your life where you sort of adopted a behavior or perspective, the more powerful that perspective is, the more emotional it is. And if you kind of think about it, like we understand this even in terms of movies, because in movies, like people don't, like when you see someone having a transformative experience where they're like never again, and they like learn and change and transform their lives, it's not an analytical experience. They're not going and sitting in a philosophy classroom and then going and Googling things and then reading Wikipedia and then sitting there and like reading books on Nietzsche. That's not where we see human transformation happen. And we sort of resonate with this as human beings because human transformation and learning things is something that's emotionally powerful. It's like this moment where someone like gets bullied And they're like left bloody on the floor as kids like laugh and walk down. And that's the moment, right? That's the moment when you swore never again. And then you see the protagonists get up and they start exercising and they learn mixed martial arts and they do all this stuff and like they transform their lives and get things together. And then you have your final climax and showdown. It's all emotion. Now the challenge, so we learn easily from emotions. The challenge is that what we learn is tricky. And the more emotional we are, the lessons that we learn sink in deeper, but they're actually less correct, in a sense. And this is the tricky thing about these kinds of emotional situations. So people have, this person is like, it's reasonable what they're saying. They're like, I did everything right. I did my research. I dug deep. I worked hard, got my ass into therapy, got my ass to lose 50 pounds, became professionally successful, worked on myself, I wasn't taught these things like self-love. I like didn't have parents who loved me. So like I'm doing all this stuff and it's friggin' exhausting. And this is what happens to me. How can I not be screwed? Because I did everything that I was supposed to. And I'm still not getting what I was expecting. So then what happens is your mind comes to the conclusion it's all about natural selection. It's all about the luck of the draw. But if you think about it, what's the emotional energy behind that conclusion? It's resentment. It's dashed expectations. It's hurt. Because if your partner who you care about tells you, like, everything you're doing is not good enough, I need to be with someone who's better than you. Like, what does it tell you about yourself? What does it tell you about the value of all of the effort that you're putting in? It tells you that the value isn't enough. And then you learn that lesson, that all this crap is a waste of time. Because if it would have worked, then I wouldn't have gotten dumped. Right? That's the lesson that your mind learns. And so what do we do about this? So like if you're sitting on the outside, you can look at this and you can clearly see that adopting your girlfriend's value system, who by the way does none of the things that you do and has not accomplished nearly as much as you have, her judgment is not actually like an accurate representation of most of life. The challenge is if you're in this person's shoes, like that sort of doesn't matter, right? Because at the end of the day, you got dumped and it hurts. Like, so other people sort of telling you like, bro, you're a catch. Like, she's crazy. Like, don't worry about what she thinks. There are going to be a lot of women out there who will be very interested in like what you have to offer and would be very lucky to date someone who is focused on their physical health, professionally successful, and like goes to therapy and like works on themselves. Like, that's awesome. Right? Like, that's fantastic. So people will sort of say things like, there's other fish in the sea, don't let it get to you, things like that. But I want you all to acknowledge that the conclusions that your mind comes to are going to be more exacerbated the more hurt you feel. Because in this moment, you feel like it's not doing anything. And that's sort of true because it didn't work, quote unquote, with her, right? But there's still like value to what you're doing, which it's hard to believe because you feel resentment. So what do you do in this kind of situation? The first thing that you've got to do is, as this person's already done, and that's why I'm really like honestly proud of this person, because they recognize that these thoughts are coming from a week where their mood has been very bad. And we've got to be really, really careful about forming permanent conclusions from temporary moods.
We have to be really, really careful when forming permanent conclusions from temporary moods. I'm stealing that and making a Facebook status out of it. That, among all the other things he said and that we've elaborated on, is gold. So that makes me think about the permanent conclusions that many men have made from temporary moods. You're having a bad day or a bad week, and on top of that, you have this other stuff surrounding your dating or romantic life or lack thereof, and you find yourself making permanent conclusions. And what amplifies that even more is that then you go into these echo chambers.
All these whores still want their husbands to take care of them.
It's like you gotta pay for it. I shouldn't have to pay for it.
My mother was a good woman.
Cash, credit, debit, they all want the same thing.
Girls, they like to be treated like crap. I never got laid until I was a jerk.
I was born here. I'm a good American. I deserve to get laid. I deserve sex.
Get some, bro. USA! Stop. So let's go do something about it.
Like what?
these online forums and groups that validate those experiences and emotions. Sure, we need that to a degree, but to what end? Yes, you need to know that what you feel isn't fake, but at the same time, you can't stew in it. So I now imagine a man older than 25 that's dealt with some of this stuff since childhood. He already has all these insecurities. He's never been coached up or loved in his youth. His social skills are subpar and his physical appearance is average at best. What does he do? He goes to Dr. K's website, healthygamer.com, or some other medium like it, or he finds a therapist to start uprooting all that other stuff. Because I know I can't help that. I know most individuals can't help that. That's not what we're trained to do. Men need to seriously do what takes the most strength and get that mental and emotional health up to par, way before seeing a dating coach and getting their physical appearance up to par. And what I have to sort of explain that in a more educated manner is, yep, you guessed it, Dr. K. Here you go.
You have all these people like pickup artists that are purely focused on the practical aspect, but don't understand anything of the internal struggles you face when people give you advice. Can you make a video about virginity? I'm an adult virgin and I'm massively insecure about it. I used to have a ton of insecurities tied to my virginity, thinking I hadn't had sex because I wasn't funny enough, interesting enough, kind enough, attractive enough, etc. Dr. K's videos, I've managed to separate all of these insecurities from my virginity. I have friends, including girls, that think I'm funny, interesting, kind, attractive. But despite this, just the fact that I've never had sex bothers me. No matter how much I try to convince myself it doesn't mean anything, a part of my mind goes to the fact that I want to but haven't, and it must be because of some kind of flaw. And society claims to be supportive of virgins, especially on the internet, but in reality, it's not the case. I get bullied, made fun of, pitied, etc. And even if people don't actually care if you're a virgin, when they use it as an insult, it hurts. For example, when someone says something misogynistic and someone says you clearly never felt the touch of a woman, it still feels like a personal insult, implying that people who can't get laid are like that because they're misogynistic. When in reality, some of the people I know who are the most popular with girls are massively misogynistic. When people offer advice for dealing with this, it's always useless. They either say it's easy to get laid and it's your own fault if you can't, which makes the insecurities worse, or they say you just shouldn't care, like I don't battle to convince myself every day that it's not something to be ashamed of, and that I could just wake up one day and become unbothered with ease, which also makes the insecurities worse because now I'm both insecure about being a virgin and about caring. Just change, just be different. Or they say work on yourself, which is good general life advice and something I do and helps a lot in many parts of my life, but does not help at all for this particular issue. Even in this community, I've heard those kinds of things. The only people who actually seem to listen and validate your experience are red pillars and black pillars, but I don't agree with either of those communities. The only person who seems to actually understand and offer useful advice to lonely men without turning to misogyny is Dr. K, which is why I really feel like it would be really helpful if he made a video specifically on the topic of how to not be ashamed when you're a virgin despite trying to get laid. Okay, looks like I have big shoes to fill. Really appreciate the post. I think it's really great that we have a place that we can talk about this kind of stuff without resorting to toxic communities. So let's try to understand, like, what's the deal with virginity? So like sometimes we are virgins, right? So we're at a particular age. You know, I've heard people complain about being a virgin at the age of 30, 35, even 60, 65. I was talking to a monk once. He was talking about his regrets in life. But also like 19, 18, 17, even 15. So we all, or not all, but society basically conditions us to value being able to have sex. And it sort of makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? Like, so like the purpose of life is procreation. So like, if you're not procreating, you're like not worthy in some way. And then that kind of maybe general evolutionary thing then gets extrapolated, overinterpreted, you know, pulled far, far, far away from evolutionary biology, and people start making generalizations in society about your value as a human being, whether you've gotten laid or not laid, right? Like, people do that. And so there are a lot of people out there who try to be supportive, and it's like, hey, you know, just like work on yourself, like you'll be okay, like it's all right. And I think that this is where, as the person sort of mentioned, the red pill and the black pill communities are very emotionally validating in this way, right? They're the one place where people are going to sort of like acknowledge that this is a problem. They're going to do very different things with it. So the red pill community is, here's a guide to get laid, right? It's kind of like, this is the way of the world. The black pill community is going to, and I'm generalizing here as well, you can't get laid, you're screwed just like we are, we might as well all give up, right? Because there's no hope. So if you're someone who's a virgin and you're insecure about it, which sort of makes sense, right? Because like the reason you're insecure is because there is this societal pressure. And even if some people are supportive, like people still kind of like, you know, you're going to get a double take. Even if someone's trying to be nice and you kind of tell them, oh yeah, I've never had sex before. Like, let's say you're on your third date with someone. You're like, yeah, I've never had sex before, right? Because y'all are talking about previous partners. Like you're going to get a double take. Like you're going to get that tiny amount of judgment. You're going to get it like, oh, you know? And then like, what does that mean? Is there something wrong with this person? Like what are they thinking now? Like, do I want to have sex with someone who's never had sex before? Like there's all kinds of like implicit judgments. And then the problem is that if we're in this situation, there isn't really a clear way out, right? So is this an issue of insecurity and shame? Because if this is an issue of insecurity and shame, like I can go work on myself, I can go learn about my insecurities, I can meditate, I can go see a therapist, I can learn about all this stuff, and I can even fix my insecurity and shame. But fixing your insecurity and shame doesn't like automatically mean you're gonna get laid, right? Like obviously. But the people who sort of advise you to fix the insecurity and shame and like, don't worry about being a virgin. It's not like you can do that, but it's not like people are lining up outside the door. It's like you're like, I'm cured of shame. And you walk around with like a sign and then people are like, oh, like, let's have sex. It doesn't work like that. On the flip side, there are people who are sort of giving you like advice on how to get laid, right? If your problem is that you're a virgin, go get laid. Here's how you so this person is, I think, a man who's interested in women. So let's assume a heteronormative perspective here. Although the shame, especially amongst homosexual men, is like, I know it sounds bizarre, but can be very, very high. I've almost seen more shame in homosexual men because there's a presumption that if I'm gay, like gay dudes are down to have sex like all the time. So if you can't get laid, like all that kind of stuff, the shame can be really, really crippling for homosexual men. Shame can be crippling for women as well for the same reason. It's like, oh, like dudes are down to get laid anytime. So if I can't get laid and I'm a woman, like there must be something even worse, right? So there's all kinds of stuff. Like the shame is piling on. And when it comes to actually like going out and let's say getting laid, like there are people who will tell you all this kind of stuff. Like, oh, just like get out more and like go meet people and things like that. But when you go do that, like, I don't know how to say this, but if people say like, okay, just meet more people. So let's say like I go to a party, okay? If I go to a party and like I am insecure about myself and I am ashamed about myself for being a virgin, how do you think that's going to affect how I behave at the party? How do you think that's going to affect like how I talk to girls, right? So now this is the challenge, is that a lot of people are giving advice about what to do. You can sign up for some course where they'll like teach you like how to date. Like, oh my God, like I'm gonna teach you all the secrets that will get you laid. And then you do that, but then you're carrying this bundle of insecurity, which actually sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you lack confidence and you go to a social situation, then like that's gonna shine through in some way, right? And it's gonna sabotage your efforts to form intimate connections with people. So what do you do if you're in this situation? Because fixing the shame isn't enough. And also like just going out and trying to get laid doesn't work. And there's a really simple reason for this. And that's because the two things are synergistic. So if you really want to learn how to overcome this, you kind of got to do both.
And yep, Dr. K saved the day. You got to do both. I know this to be true because before I was whatever I'm perceived to be as far as personality goes, and before I became physically attractive to some people, I was a skinny, wide-nosed, nostril-having, big-head, annoying kid that just had all the love and reassurance from my family structure that helped me navigate those rough days. You guys just need that part, that self-love and the ability to navigate those insecurities, and ditch all those self-validating echo chambers that confirm doom and gloom. Get that internal stuff worked out and then get to the tactical part of it all, which is how to socialize and date. One of the things he talks about in another part of the last video that I shared are the milestones that men hit as they're growing up, and how if you don't hit those milestones, that there are a lot of insecurities that manifest along the way. So yes, if you haven't dated, If you haven't had any physical intimacy or gotten laid by a certain age, then it all piles up on you the older you get, creating massive anxiety and insecurities. That reminds me of a scene from the movie Superbad.
Shauna? Shauna was 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so, but she was insanely hot.
Exactly. She was too hot. Okay, that's what sucks.
How can that possibly suck? I'd be psyched if I got in with her. And you got like 24 hand jobs.
Yes, and 3/4 of a blowjob, but who's counting, Evan? Look, it was the peak of my ass-getting career and it happened way, way too early.
You're like Orson Welles.
Exactly. If I'd paced myself, I'd be having at least steady sex with a decent-looking girl. I honestly see now why Orson Welles ate his fat ass to death.
Well, you'll have sex in college. Everyone does.
Yes, but the point is to be good at sex by the time you get to college.
Listen, she's DTF. She's down to fuck, man. P and G. She wants to fuck, man. Tonight is a night that fucking is an actual possibility.
You just sound like an idiot. You're not gonna be able to sleep with her, man.
No, dude, I don't want to talk a lot of shit, okay? But she's gonna be at the party, and she's gonna be drunk, and she likes me at least a little, enough to get with me. At the very least, I'll make out with her. 2 weeks hand job, month blow job, whatever. And then I make her my girlfriend. And I've got like 2 solid months of sex. By the time college rolls around, I'll be like the Iron Chef at Pound and Vige.
That whole movie is about the struggle, but it's what we all go through internally on some level as teens. Essentially, what you're going to find out when all this stuff comes together is that there's always been somebody out there for you, and that you have more in common with everybody else than you actually realize. Some of the Chads and Tyrones are bigger geeks with insecurities than you'd ever imagine. And a lot of that surface stuff is simply a cover, which is why most of them are total assholes. I know I'm not equipped to help deal with the psychology of it, but I'm surely fit to assist when it comes to the dating aspect of it all. The cold approach, the DM, online interactions, I got you. I can help you cover all those angles. And once you have the one that's interested in seeing what you're actually about, I can give you some guidance there too, for free. Just subscribe to the channel. And that's all I got. If you like or dislike this video, hit that like or dislike button. And as always, do subscribe. Until next time,